Well, it's about to get chippy, as we say in hockey, ahead of a House vote expected to come tomorrow on whether to reauthorize a controversial FISA surveillance program, allowing the government to surveil non-U.S. citizens abroad as part of counterterrorism measures. It expires January 19th. But today, a bipartisan group of House and Senate lawmakers are threatening to derail that bill unless protections are added for law-abiding Americans who get caught up in that surveillance.
We understand that there are threats overseas, foreign targets, people we have to be concerned about to protect the safety of the American people. What we're against is, without a warrant, having the communications of law-abiding Americans swept up in that process.
Well, you saw a Democrat there. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul was also at that news conference today. And I know you say you're willing to filibuster that bill now. The senator is with us. Why?
Well, I think when we talk about the Bill of Rights, an integral part of our Constitution, it is worth filibustering. It's worth trying to say, you know what, we will have to obey the Bill of Rights. Americans need these protections. So, for example, this spy program is intended to spy on foreigners in foreign lands. I'm for it. It's a way to protect ourselves against enemies. However, as they spy on foreigners, they collect a lot of Americans. We're talking about millions of American phone calls and emails are in this database. Innocent Americans. They're incidentally collected. They're collected in sort of peripheral ways. They were never the target of anything, but they're in the database. The data is collected without any constitutional protections. I'm okay with that with foreigners, but for Americans, the Constitution always applies. I don't want domestic law enforcement searching this big database that's supposed to be on foreigners and trying to accuse people of domestic crimes. I think the Constitution applies to everybody, every American here, and it is worth filibustering over.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that we've agreed through our Constitution to lower the bar where foreigners have access to those rights. That's fine. But all of us have to be protected at a certain higher level. So the question then is, how do you change it and keep us safe at the same time? Because you do have, Senator, people arguing, well, we'll just give up some freedom so you can keep us safe.
Well, the thing is that's what the terrorists are trying to take away from us, is our rule of law, our freedoms, our American traditions of Bill of Rights. That's what we're fighting to preserve. So if we give up that because we're fearful of terrorists, I wonder, will it have all been worthwhile, all the thousands of American soldiers who died to defend the Constitution? I think you can have both. I have no problem with spying on foreigners in foreign lands and they don't get constitutional protections.
Sure.
But if you accidentally or incidentally gather up millions of Americans, here's an example. Right now, the Justice Department has decided they're going to go after medical marijuana in Colorado. Colorado has legalized this. We have this enormous database. Would you want the U.S. government to be searching through a database on foreigners that's incidentally collecting information on Americans and then have the federal government go and try to overturn Colorado's law? So there's a lot of things that really should involve the Constitution. Any American accused of a crime deserves the Fourth Amendment, which says the government can't look at your stuff unless they have probable cause you've committed a crime. They have to name you and they have to say what they're looking for. This information has been gathered with no constitutional protections. It's just all scarfed up by the millions and millions. And so we have to be very careful about letting the government just look at that without any kind of control.
Well, your hallmark on Congress has been your ability to filibuster. So we look forward to seeing what you will say about this. It's an interesting point. I think, again, people are in that comfort zone of we just want to be safe. But what you're talking about potentially that can go wrong is very important for us to know about. Just before I let you go, and we don't have a lot of time, but I want to talk about the Iran nuke deal deadline that's approaching and where you think we will be when that deadline gets here.
I think with the Iranian agreement, I had misgivings in the beginning because I was worried that we gave too much too early and whether or not they would continue to comply. But everything I've seen so far is that Iran has complied with the nuclear agreement, so I think we ought to keep it. They are not necessarily doing what we want on the ballistic side, developing conventional warfare, but that's not part of the agreement. So I'm a little different than some. Some people want to tear up the agreement. I think we should be actually negotiating a new agreement on ballistic missiles with them and trying to continue to engage. And I think ultimately the Iranian people, once they see that we're not interested in invading their country, most of the Iranian people would like to see the Revolutionary Guard and the mullahs overthrown. But I think it could actually work the opposite direction if we begin destroying the agreements we have with them.
It's interesting what you say, because it buys a little time to give that revolution transition, which is what I call it, a chance to take hold and move forward. That's an interesting perspective on it. So based on what you're saying, we might see the president recertify and keep that in place so that the conversation can continue there on the ground in Iran potentially. Senator Rand Paul, great to see you. Great to see you in good health, and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.